speak on this item? Seeing none, motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, the next one, John Mickelson for Galleria for Better Health. The applicant is seeking a conditional use grant to allow for a therapeutic massage center for the property located at 11431 North Fort Washington Road. Is there a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 We are now in public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak on this matter? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of closing public hearing, please say aye. Or do you need a
Aye.
motion?
Motion. I move.
Motion.
to close
Second.
public
Second. Now, does everyone agree? Exit public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next one, John Mickelson for Cedar Creek Massage. Applicant is seeking the conditional use grant to allow for a therapeutic massage center for the property located at 11431 North Fort Washington Road. Is there a motion to enter public hearing?
So moved.
Second. Motion in the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this item? Also seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to close public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Motion in a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And the last one, John Mickelson for Embrace Your Face. Applicant is seeking a conditional use grant to allow for aesthetics studio located at 11431 North Fort Washington Road. Is there a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Motion in a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are now in public hearing for this last item. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
Motion in a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we're back. Does anyone have any question on any item they'd like to entertain at this point? Or is there a motion?
I've just kind of a point of order question. I mean, there's several massage therapy clinics that are coming up for this same site. Clearly, it's on consent agenda. My hunch is that council's going to approve these, or commission's going to approve these tonight. Is there anything that we can do to help the property owner / management company maybe not have to go through this exact process, or just approve his buildings for this use moving forward, or just kind of have a blanket one? My understanding is a lot of these are real small, like small suites, one massage therapist or a couple. It doesn't seem inappropriate for the area. I was a tenant in that building, a few years back. Those tenants didn't bother anybody, there or nearby. So for people like him or other offices similar to this within the city, I think it's appropriate, in my opinion, that, something maybe more expeditious would be available to property owners.
Well, the only thing we could do at this point would be to modify the code and move these from a conditional to a permitted use. And if that's something the commission wants us to look into, we can look into that as a future policy item.
Yeah, just to clarify, I did talk about this with staff a little while ago, because there's a lot of these that keep on coming up, and we talked about perhaps modifying the code and changing them from conditional to permitted if they met certain criteria that didn't warrant digging any further. But that's an effort to rewrite the code, and we probably should look at that. This office is getting harder and harder to rent out, and
I agree.
we have to determine what the criteria are, which we don't need to go through this process, but that's a whole code rewrite effort. And these aren't new uses, they're already there. This is just kind of cleaning up some ones that slipped through the cracks over the years.
Right.
So for now, since the code's not changed, we have to go through this process.
Yeah, that's fine.
Does anyone else have any input on that general topic? Is that
I have a
something the
question on
commission's?
I mean, it's a bigger office than the 5 that we've seen between last month and this month. Do we expect several more coming through, or is this the bulk of them? Like maybe others already went through the process.
There was 9 identified in that building.
So a few more.
Yeah, a couple of them chose not to. And then across the street, another Mickelson owns those, and there was 27, I believe, right? 18 identified at that property.
So we have another 22 or 20-ish. Some of them are choosing to go
potentially,
elsewhere.
yes.
I just am recalling also what Mr. Mickelson said about, it all comes back to really the code. We're following what the code is right now. Just it's
Correct.
a question of whether it's right. I do have a question on Joey's though. we get there.
Go ahead.
It's about the 21% open space. So Jack, and the site, is this Jack?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. I need bifocal. In the site plan, it says with the added impervious area, the final building site will need to provide approximately 21% open space in order to comply. Can we not ascertain that right now? Like, is there?
So there's two different things here. There's, if you recall, this was part of that ICAP PUD.
Yep.
So there's about 5 or 6 different sites. So the
Acre.
totality has to meet the 40% over.
Okay.
Will have to meet that 21% to make sure that they meet the 40% overall.
Hence the word entire.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on these 5 items, or is there a motion?
I would move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And those 5 items are approved. Next up, we have 2 regular public hearings, so we'll take them up independently and vote on them separately. The first is Concord Development Company. The applicant is seeking a conditional use grant amendment approval to allow for an extension to meet conditions of the original CUG approval on July 25th, 2022 for a fitness center. It's a property located at 1300 to 1380 West Mequon Road, Anytime Fitness.
Motion to open public hearing.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Does anyone wish to speak on this matter at this time?
Good evening, Kevin Schmolt on behalf of Concord Development. The only comment to make would be to ask for a consideration on the condition for a fence to be replaced as part of the property. The landlord, the owner of the property, understands the expectation that the fence be made to look new, but it's been determined that it's really just a condition of paint, and his proposal is to power wash, paint, and repair the existing fence instead of replacing.
Okay, we'll respond when we go back in the regular session. Anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any questions or comments from the commission? Or would we like to respond to the request? I personally think if they can make it look new by cleaning it and painting it, that's fine, as opposed to completely replacing it.
Is this the fence that, there's a picture, isn't there?
There is. There are actually a couple of different fences. Maybe we're not talking about the
Yeah,
same.
that's the one we're talking.
Can we put those up and maybe clarify which fence we're talking about? Maybe which fence is staff talking about in the report, and which fence are we referring to from the applicant's point of view?
Sure. So the fence that we're speaking about is actually in between the north and south buildings. There's a walkway in between the 2 buildings. So the fence really blocks the view of the back access area. And when you see the exhibit that I included in your packet, you'll see that over half of the fence on the north side is either rotted or listing to the side. I don't know if it's in that kind of condition where you can just replace a board or 2. It looks like the whole thing needs to replace. The other portion on the south side of the walkway just looks like it's beginning to rot.
I think this is
Page
on
93.
Thank you.
correct.
We'll be here all day if I keep going on this. Yeah. Did I just lose it?
There is another fence for trash screening that looks like it just needs a fresh coat of paint, but
Thank you.
would you care to comment on the condition of the other fence in question? I think it's the bottom of page 93. I don't know if you can zoom in on that at all.
I think that's 2 pictures.
It's the same fence.
Yeah, this
It's
is
just one
the
portion.
entirety of the fence.
So we visited the site with this picture with the property management team, and we really don't think it's a case of rot. That post needs to be repaired, but the boards themselves are in good condition. I think the idea, the concept that we're requesting is that the fence be made to look in a good condition, whether that's new, replaced, or repaired. in a workmanlike fashion, and that to be at owner's discretion with final approval and inspection by staff, whether it's repaired or it's replaced.
Commissioner
I
Stoker.
would ask staff, what's your opinion about going out and inspecting it once the work has been completed? Is that something you would normally do, or is that appropriate?
I think our concern is that if you look at all the other requested changes in language, they're consistently asking for the owner's discretion to fix things and had listed only the exhibits shown in the previous staff report, while many of the problems are much more extensive than that, and we were just providing an example of. So staff has some concerns about letting them just do it at their discretion. I'd also hate to have them in a situation where they replace 1 or 2 boards and then they've wasted a tremendous amount of time and some resources, when probably the obvious and even cheaper way to fix it is just to replace that small portion.
But the report, I think, the staff condition now asks for replacement of the entire fence, not just
Correct.
the damaged portion.
We are requesting replacement, well, removal or replacement.
Or repair subject to staff approval of the repair plan and subsequent inspection of the repair. If they can repair it and make it look presentable. I mean, this is falling over, but it's probably because you have 1 broken post. What are others' feelings on that?
I got an opinion.
Commissioner Strelchak.
Staff seems pretty determined, as does the property owner, that there's not an agreement on what we're seeing here today. My proposal would be that I would recommend that we leave it to staff's discretion as to whether it gets repaired or replaced, but I would also request that staff goes on site and meets either with somebody in property management to review and at least understand what the applicant is asking. But in the end, I'm not looking for an argument with staff. If staff simply says, we don't agree with you, we'd like this replaced, my preference as a commissioner here would be that it would be staff's discretion, not the owner's discretion as to whether it gets replaced. And I would just ask for some consideration on, whether or not the whole thing needs to be removed, or really if a few boards could be replaced and it could be created as a like new. You can't paint rotted wood. It'll look horrible in a year. So I think that offsets that concern, for a Band-Aid fix to get through the inspection and the approval, gets it repaired or replaced properly, but also addresses the applicant's concerns on whether or not they really need to go through the expense of replacing the entire fence.
I think it's a fair proposal. There'll certainly be other inspections as it relates to the construction as part of this conditional use. And I think our intent was to avoid an approval tonight that required specifically the replacement of the fence, and it needs to be at staff's discretion following a site visit. We're comfortable with that.
Great.
Perfect. Are there any other comments or questions from the commission?
I do have one other
Go ahead.
clarification, potentially. The way that the staff recommendation or report is written as it relates to lighting is both the landlord's and the operator of Anytime Fitness's intent in terms of having parking lot lighting and a safe environment. We'd like to clarify, however, that this is 2 buildings, it's a very large property, and it's the intention that there's already lights on throughout the parking lot overnight, but not all of the lights. The intention with the addition of Anytime is to leave the lights nearest Anytime on 24/7 for safety of those coming and going, but to leave the rest of the parking lot lights on their current program.
Seems fair. That's how I read it, but I might have read it wrong.
Could staff maybe clarify, was the intent to keep all the lights in the entire parking lot on, or just the ones immediately adjacent to the proposed use?
I was under the impression from PD that they were requesting it all to be lit, just for the fact that they do have quite a few clients that come in around that 9-10 o'clock hour, and then shutting down things a little bit earlier could be an issue.
I would assume that they would park rather close to the use and not in the back corner of the parking lot. So it seems reasonable if there's a way to segregate these out of different circuit to control them separately. I think I'd be open to that, subject to review of staff because we haven't got any finalized plans in front of us, but I think I'm at least open to that proposal. Just to limit light pollution at night. You'd put the light right where you need it.
And energy.
It certainly will be more energy efficient as well. Is there a motion that encompasses all of that goodness?
I'd make a motion to approve, based on staff conditions, with the exception of the fence, where staff will go on site, meet with the applicant, and at staff's determination, the fence would either be recommended and required to be replaced or repaired, as well as upon staff's review of the lighting, that lighting would be acceptable to be left on 24 hours a day to help mitigate light pollution, just for the one building area, parking area for the one building. So staff's review and approval. If the PD comes back with concerns or something just from a safety standpoint, I'd ask that the applicant, listen to that wholeheartedly. The safety of the city is more important than the light pollution. But the light pollution is also important, as is the energy conservation. So the intent of my motion is to, cover both. So.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions to be resolved? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And we've approved that item. Next, maybe don't go anywhere, but next one's yours too. Applicant is seeking it's Concord Development Company again. The applicant is seeking a conditional use grant amendment approval to allow for an extension to meet conditions or the original CUG approved on July 25th, 2022 for a restaurant for the property located at 1400 to 1412 West Mequon Road, GF Smoothies. Is there a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Does anyone here tonight wish to speak about this item? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of closing public hearing, please say aye.
I'll make a motion.
We'll make a motion to close.
A second, thank you.
We got you, Mayor.
All those, well, I'm here all night.
We're doing jumping jacks with these.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Close public hearing. Okay. Aye. Public hearing is closed. Quick staff update on this item as well.
Sure, this is gonna read exactly the same way that Anytime Fitness read. It was the same request for language changes and deadline changes. So staff recommendation is to basically mimic what we just did for the previous agenda item.
So I guess maybe a motion with regard to the fence, but not including the light in this one.
I don't believe we had a condition for lighting on the GF Smoothies, although their tenant spaces, while in separate buildings, are relatively close to one another. So
But it's not 24 hour, correct?
it is
This is
definitely
not.
not 24 hour, but wouldn't that be fantastic?
So I'll make a motion to approve, with the same conditions on the fence that we had in the last approval.
And I will second again.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. That item's approved as well. Any opposed? I don't think so. All right, on to regular business. First up, the first item has been canceled and pulled off the agenda, which brings us to Tim O'Brien Homes. The applicant is seeking a wetland setback waiver, specimen tree removal to allow for the removal of specimen trees for the property located at 12333 North Lake Shore Drive. It's a matter of process. Did we table this last time or no?
We did, yep,
Okay,
in November.
usually a note on there, but I guess first we'll need a motion to remove it from the table.
So moved.
Second.
Motion in a second. All those in favor of removing it from the table, please say aye.
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 Now we can talk about it. Why don't we start off with a quick staff update, or is there anyone from here from the public who wishes to speak? We'll start off with that before we jump into a staff report. We did get at least one email on this, which I think people have read. Okay, I see no one standing up, so let's get into the staff report. Cole, are you starting out?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll be a bit brief on this one. The staff report's pretty similar to the when they were here in November 22 for the original application. So this is a request for 2 specimen tree removals at 12333 North Lakeshore Drive. As Mayor mentioned, it was tabled in November 22, and it's just for a residential home build. So the key changes from the previous application, 2 main parts. If you guys recall, there's 2 wetland strips on this property. One's kind of a little bit west of where they're proposing the house, and one's a bit east. There's 2 different wetland setbacks on each of those. The west one is a 50-foot setback or protective area. The east one is a 10-foot setback. And the previous application, the applicant had the house proposed about 14 feet off that west wetland, which was ultimately not approved as a waiver of that reduction. So they've now moved it to 30 feet off that west wetland, so still requesting the waiver for the reduction there. And then they meet that east wetland setback. And then staff also recommended lowering the elevation of the house by about 3 feet at that November meeting from that application. The revised plan that they have tonight has the house 1 foot higher than the previous application. So I'm sure there's going to be questions on this one anyway, so I'll just kind of summarize the recommendations and then see if Mike has stuff to add on the specimen trees here. So what we are recommending is the approval of the 2 specimen tree removals. We do recommend that the 50-foot setback for the west wetland is met with the location of the house in order to preserve stands of trees, and then are consistent with the recommendation to have the house elevation 4 feet lower than proposed tonight, which is consistent with the November original application. Got anything, Mike?
Okay, any questions from staff, the commission?
Got a notification when I watched it. We have no sound online.
I don't know if the audio-visual technician can hear that. Apparently, we have no sound online when people are watching at home. I'm not sure what to do about that here, but we'll keep rolling and we'll try and figure it out as we go. Any questions from the commission on the revised plans before us? I know we talked about this at great length a couple months ago. Commissioner Bach.
Just discussion?
Just discussion, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember we spent a considerable amount of time talking about this area, and I'm still a little bit confused and just want to make sure I understand everything. I had a chance to drive out there and walk around and look at that property this afternoon. It's a challenging site. I mean, the home that I was at this afternoon, I mean, it's clear that there's, like many properties around here, have a whole bunch of ash trees that are gone. On this particular property that we're talking about, there's going to be a considerable amount of landscaping that's going to be needed. There's a lot of buckthorn. There's a lot of dead ash that are going to have to be removed, plus the specimen trees or the trees that we're talking about. So that's going to be a whole new area. I mean, it's going to look completely different. Plus one of the homeowners on here, I mean, it is clear in their front yard that, all those ash trees are gone. So that's kind of low. And I can see how that would just be kind of almost like a wetland with a lot of water. So, I can see this as a real challenging site, and I can see why some of the neighbors would have some concerns. And I remember Commissioner Stoker was talking about, we were talking about basements last time or different possibilities. So I don't know if we've had discussions about that. I don't know if the builders and the neighbors got together and, we're able to have I know you're not going to agree 100% on everything, but we're able to get together and talk through some of these things and come to some consensus. But still seems like there's some tension there and some unresolved issues. So I don't know. I just need to get updated on some of that.
Yeah, just to kind of touch base on your concerns about the trees. The trees, so we knew kind of going into this lot that the trees in the front of the lot were going to be primarily removed. So about a third of the lot was going to be removed just because it's all like you referenced, dead ash, buckthorn. And that kind of goes all the way up and past that first kind of wetland up in the front that Cole referenced, where there's kind of a 10-foot setback off of that. The trees that we're kind of referencing in the house for the specimen trees, there's a 21-inch American linden and a 25-inch red oak. Both of those, I think it's 23 and number 27 on that diagram up there. No matter where we move the house on this lot, I think I referenced last time, those trees are done. I mean, we've tried 3 different locations on this lot, and because of the restrictiveness of this lot, we can't save those 2 trees in particular. And those are really the only trees on site that meet the size requirements to be considered specimen species and size. The other trees that I'm referencing in the plant, because of the nature of what the front of the lot looks like, there's 31 other trees that I reference in the report that are additional American lindens to the back side of the lot. The reason that I stuck to the 50-foot setback, recommendation is because you'll preserve at least 11 of those if we stick with the 50 feet. If you would grant the 30-foot variance, unfortunately, all 31 are going to be. I mean, you can kind of see on this diagram, all 31 of them are going to be essentially gone. I think there might be 2 that have a chance, but you're still getting really close with that, the building footprint, and then kind of, some of the overdigs and stuff that are going to be necessary for that basement and stuff. So that's kind of the summary of what I think from a tree perspective on this lot. So
That's a complicated issue, so I think we probably need to break it into pieces and attack them one at a time, then try and assemble it all at the end. Before we do that, though, Commissioner Chorn.
Yeah, help me understand, maybe this is a question for the builder. If we want the 50-foot setback off the west, is that an issue with the placement of the building? Does that put you too close to the east wetland?
They did have a diagram of what that would look like. They didn't provide a grading plan because, as I'm sure they'll comment, is with the elevation that they currently are showing. Sorry, I went the wrong way. With the elevation they're currently showing, this would be very difficult for them to not impact these wetlands because it's only 10 feet from the edge of the house. So just grading down from the elevation would be a challenge, or they would need retaining walls or something of that nature.
I mean, is there a middle ground that, not 50, but 40, or, there's got to be some movement here.
30. The 30-foot, what they showed on the other, on this other figure, is what they were proposing. They got the grading to work out that way. Most of the reasoning for the 50-foot setback recommendation would be to save those trees that Mike was referencing.
Can I respond?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just on the setback on east wetlands, the concern that I've got from the home builder is that we'd be very worried about disrupting the eastern wetlands in digging the basement if we were to be that close, just like the construction process.
Well, I think if I recall, the more pristine of the 2 wetlands is actually the wetlands to the west.
Yes.
The wetlands in the front are of lower quality, hence the smaller setback. I think more of the issue in the front is making sure that water flow path from south to north is unimpeded and unaltered. So I think we'd rather encroach further on the ones in front than the ones on the back, so long as the water flow is not impacted. The ones in back are more beneficial from the plant species and the amount of water pickup that goes into the ground there.
There's more wetness on the east part of the property than there is on the west. The other thing that I'll point out is that the proposed building location, even though it's slightly, it is elevated versus the surrounding area. So without any home gear at all, water isn't flowing through the proposed location because it is elevated.
That is correct. You're trying to hit the one posted stamp you can build on.
The
water that's flowing from south to north is east. It's not through the proposed location.
But I think just a point of clarification, the wetness in the front doesn't mean it's a better wetlands though.
Correct.
It's just more wet
Yes.
because the water flows there. I think the ones to the west are actually letting more water get into the ground, which is what we want wetlands to do.
But that also is the reason why we don't want to move closer east, because the further we go east, the more wetness there is.
Well, there's more water on the surface.
Water, not wet.
There's more surface water there that flows freely.
Yep.
I don't know how accurate there's a graph or a chart, I think it was provided by someone who lives nearby, of the water flow patterns. Do we at all know if that's accurate? Because it seems like there's quite a bit of room to where the water's flowing. So moving this farther to the east would actually be a net benefit. You'd have more setback for the wetlands in the west. And we just don't want to disturb the water flow on the east, but the wetlands in the front are low grade. The DNR would probably let us fill those, but you just can't impede the stream.
Yeah, you're talking about page 122, and my understanding and my walking the property several times, I don't disagree with the general flow of what they've proposed there. To me, that seems accurate. But again, it's east of the proposed home location.
I think what we're talking
nowhere
about is
near
trying to
the-
push the home farther to the east to stay away from the wetlands in the rear.
In
There are
November,
ways
our
to get the
discussion
DNR
was,
to omit a wetland, correct?
We're not even talking about filling it. We're just talking about getting closer to it. So if in staff's opinion, would we rather get right up to the one in front or have more buffer in the back to the west?
If they're, they're meeting that 10-foot setback from that east wetland in both the 30 and 50-foot conditions from the west one. So, either way is not going to impact that east wetland.
Would we be willing? That has a change to the home, the way it sits on the lot, though, to achieve that, correct? Or a lot of it has to do with the elevation as well.
Right.
Component of elevation.
I think that was the concern, was the slope off the front of the house would be very steep if they were 10 feet from that east wetland.
But since the one in front is not as nice, would you go 0? As long as the water flow path wasn't impeded?
I don't think they could. I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think a 0-foot setback would be constructable without disturbance. So.
a 0-foot setback on the east wetlands?
Yeah.
For what
Right.
purpose?
Or
I'm just
even
asking what's
yeah.
possible.
Yeah, or even reducing it less than 10 would probably be pretty tight for construction, I think.
Commissioner Stoker.
So I was very vocal about this in the last meeting, and while I actually appreciate this grading plan because I see it working, obviously we have a tree issue with this. I can sit here and say with pretty much confidence, I don't see this commission accepting the amount of trees that are going to be affected by this placement. And I thought about this and read every word of this a couple times to even get a grasp around it for me. And I do understand this, but it's complicated. And I think this is a time where we really have to look at staff's recommendations and we have to follow them. There's a lot of things here. I was a proponent of changing the way you were designing the house to help make some concessions for some of these things. I personally, even if the trees weren't an issue here, I would approve this based on the grading plan, but I would empathize with the neighbors because in my own opinion, it's not going to feel right. That being said, I would still approve it because that's really all you can do on this lot. You are definitely hamstrung here. You don't have a lot of opportunity, and I empathize with that. And I'm actually going to be finding myself in a situation very similar to this in the very near future. So I think because of the complexity of the issue, and maybe not everyone on this commission is understanding it, I think we as a commission, to my opinion, really, really, really need to rely heavily on staff's recommendations, because even me as a builder, I'm relying on the city engineers that they are comfortable with the way this lot is going to grade, the way you propose it. They have much more expertise on wetlands than I do. So as much as I would like to say, let's make concessions for the builder because I'm a strong proponent of Tim O'Brien Homes, which I am, I think we have to seriously consider what staff is recommending and really let them ultimately make the decisions in conjunction with the tree preservation that we have in the city. So all that being said, I think there's going to have to be some concessions on the design of the house, because I can't see, in my mind, I can't find a way that you're going to make it work where you're going to meet your wetland requirements and not be affecting 31 trees. So I know it's not an answer, and it's not a good answer. I don't have an answer unless you start changing the elevation of the house. And I think ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. I'm certainly not the only one making the decision. Like I said, I would approve this right now if the tree issue wasn't. And if someone wants to make a motion, I might even be okay with the trees. I probably won't have a lot of fans in this community if I okayed impacting 31 specimen trees. But I can see that working, and it works for me.
The thing that I get tripped up on is it's 31 trees of the right species, but they're not the right size to fall under the ordinance. So there's really.
But I understand that.
Yeah,
But
it's.
also moving further east to 10 feet within the east wetlands only saves 11 of those trees.
I understand.
I know we're talking about 31,
It's
but
again, for those of you who know me, I probably am the most generous tree removal person on this commission.
Facts.
Fact. So again, if someone else would make the motion to approve as it is, I would probably follow through. But I think the battle's going to be with the trees. And
as the mayor said, these are undersized trees that don't fit the criteria.
And that's why I would probably support it. But it would be an interesting vote. So again, I understand you guys. This is it's an extremely challenging lot.
The other thing is, and I watched the entire hour from last November's meeting. We left the meeting essentially informally agreed that a 30-foot setback from the west wetlands was something that generally the commission. I asked the commission, so generally without a formal vote, is that where we're at? And no one shook their head.
And the
said
fact
no.
is, I believe, and staff can recommend, we have made exceptions to the setbacks for wetlands before. So there's a precedent with that, and I'm fine with that. The 30 versus 50, again, it's coming down to the tree situation for me. And again, I would defer to certainly staff's understanding of which wetland is better and more pristine. I'm not that guy. So I would defer to them. But I don't have the problem with the 30-foot setback. That's not a problem for me.
Just seems like it's a moving target. Like last time we were roughly on 30, and then now we're back to 50. So it makes it difficult for us to adjust and accommodate.
There was general concurrence that 30 was acceptable last month, but you've got different commissioners this month too. It's not all the same cast.
But it's hard for us to adjust and accommodate if every
agree.
time we
There's
come
also
back it changes.
there's also a lot of talk about the elevation.
Right. There was no concession made on the elevation. In fact, it went the other direction. So it kind of went the opposite of where I was.
Last month was generally in line with staff's feedback, which was down 3 feet, but we're up 1 now, so we've grown a foot. There is another concern about the height of the structure, but I checked the zoning district. The maximum height you can build above grade is 42 feet.
They're not even going to be anywhere
Not
near
even
that.
close, even if you count the whole basement.
However, in my professional opinion, there should be some consideration of the homes
Next
immediately to the north and south. Now, again, if you hold fast to that, this may not be a buildable lot. So I'm not remotely saying that this house isn't going to be higher than the houses to the north and south. They have to be. But does it need to be?
On the other side of Lake Drive, we've had situations where that 42-foot house has gone in, and the lots are very long and narrow, and it does look different.
Yeah. So again, I think we're willing. I think I would be very willing to work with you even on the trees, and I think I'm close here. I think the challenge is what everyone else's opinions can be on the trees. And I'm still struggling with a little bit why we're even higher than we were the last time. Again, that would be my only my angst in this is that we're higher than we were even before. And I was one probably pushing you harder to try and see how you can get this house lower. So anyway, that's my comments. Just see how it goes there.
Just to quickly respond to that, we had talked about last time how there was a change in the staff at Tim O'Brien Homes, and that in that change, it would switched over to working with Pete, and we were so focused on the planning commission and everything else that all the rest of the planning had already been done with building the home. There was just honestly a miss between the depth of the basement and what we had put in front of the planning commission. So.
Commissioner Schaefer had her hand up.
I did. I feel like I've said this before in other issues similar to this, but just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And that feels very true to me on this lot. And I don't discount the fact that that landowners have rights, but if you're trying to make a square peg fit into a round hole and we have all of these different considerations that we're trying to make this work, perhaps it doesn't work. And certainly not if it's going to impact the neighbors. Certainly not. I don't understand the going up a foot. I guess it feels a little bit like, so you said, oh, it's a moving target. Well, to John's point, you also disregarded what was recommended and went the opposite direction. So I was not here in November. Yeah. I did my research and paid attention, and I actually walked the property, and I feel like we've had other situations like this where someone buys a lot. This lot I feel was for sale for an extended period of time, and perhaps this is why. I don't understand having to make multiple concessions just to make it work. Perhaps the house that you were trying to build does not work for this lot, and perhaps that is the reality.
Commissioner Strelchak.
So I've got a question: is why did the house go up? Are you maintaining your desire to build a 10-foot basement?
No, what's being proposed here is a 9-foot basement, which was always a part of the plans. Yep.
Yeah, the 2 yard grades on that grading plan were set up with an 8-foot differential on the initial drawings, and it's now correctly reflecting a 9-foot differential between exposed yard grade and final yard grade. I think it's also important to understand that the final yard grade of 701 is in the immediate environs of the front door on the property, and that the bulk of the yard is at 697 or lower, which is a foot lower than the neighbor to the south yard. So we do come up sharply next to the front door, but to consider or to view this as if your whole yard is 4 feet higher than the neighbor's yard and dumping water that direction, not a good assessment.
So just to share my thoughts on where we're at, I agree with Commissioner Schaefer and Commissioner Stoker on this one. I agree with Mike Keys. The city forester would prefer a little more of a buffer in the back. You're asking for a specimen tree removal. There are other specimen trees that aren't meeting the caliper, but they are specimen species in the back. And if you're asking for a concession, if we can preserve something that's similar on the lot, that's the intent of the tree ordinance. Whether the caliper is the exact fit or not, if there's some give and take and there's some approval, that can be made, this is an appropriate place to discuss it. Fitting a square peg into a round hole, that's what I felt exactly last month. I felt that, the lot had some wetland issues, it had some setback issues, it had some grading issues, and I have far less experience than Commissioner Stoker with building houses. Far less. But, the number one thing is that not every house can go on every single lot, and there's certain things that are appropriate for certain lots. I don't know that this is an appropriate fit for this one. I spoke out in opposition to it last month. I'm still on the same page this month. My concern is water flow, the wetlands in the back, the tree preservation. I served on the tree board for several years, so I'm one of the more conservative ones. And I was asked to be on the tree board to replace Alderman Adams, who was very passionate. And you get a hard no for her. She was sitting here. She's like, you should just build it somewhere else. She's of a different school of thought. At least we're considering it, and it's an option. But listening to staff and listening to staff recommendations, and You know, although you feel it's a moving target, you worked last month and so did city staff. And then we've had other things that have come up in tonight's meeting that we're, quite frankly, we're listening to because we're trying to be reasonable, accommodating, but also prudent to the neighbors. As it sits right now, I don't know that it's a fit for me. But that's just where I'm sitting, and I'm continuing to listen to what my fellow commissioners have to say.
Commissioner Barnes?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been stated, so I won't repeat any of that. I think the one just where I'm a little confused is on the basement height that we had talked about before and how that relates to the site. If you could just repeat for that, because I walked away from last meeting thinking, well, if the basement height was reduced, would that enable some fit, so to speak?
Yeah, so last time we spoke about a 10-foot basement. Today we're proposing a 9-foot.
So this is with the 9 foot, even though the house being raised. That's the clarification I was seeking.
Yep.
Okay. Well, again, without repeating, those are the same kind of concerns I would have.
So,
Commissioner Stoker.
if I may, a couple of clarifications that both commissioners, we've had two people state that they're worried about water drainage. I am 100% confident that if this has been vetted by the city, water management is not my concern. I think you've managed water here. And the neighbors may feel uncomfortable with that, but gravity never fails. Gravity is going to make the water work the way this grading plan is designed. I'm totally confident, assuming it's been vetted by our engineering department, that works. So that may not be a real reassuring thing to the neighbors, but it will work. It's the city's responsibility to make sure that works in their engineering department. So the way I see this is, if you could make this house work, and I don't know if this is an ability or not, at a different elevation to not impact the trees as much, or to maybe allow us to adjust the wetland setbacks, I would leave it in the city's, I would let staff approve that. The bottom line here is, even if this house was 4 feet lower, I don't know if it's still going to work. I can't answer that question without seeing it. My bigger concern that a lot of people aren't looking at here is we have one house elevation. We haven't seen the other 3 elevations, and we don't need them. I understand. We all understand the house is going to be out of the ground. The bottom line from my perspective is, and I've never done this, you may not be able to build this house at this elevation on this lot. And that's the first time that I would, as a commissioner in 13 years, have said that to someone. Now, if you can build this exact same house and it's 4 feet lower and you don't get your full exposure, that might be the concession you're looking at here. I don't know. And I feel bad that we've gone from November to December, now we're here in January, and you're nowhere further. From my perspective, we don't know the answer to that question. If this house worked 4 feet lower, would you proceed, or are you more apt to change the plan? I don't know the answer, and only you can make that decision.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that's kind of concerning to me in preparing for the meeting tonight, I was up late last night in reviewing the report from Landmark Engineering Sciences, who did the soil report. Their exact language when they talk about the seasonal high groundwater levels is they specifically state that it's not recommended that the basement grade be below 692.25. When the staff report was put together, that language got changed, and it actually says, although outside of current regional standard design. So it seems as though this idea of sinking the house deeper into the ground went from Landmark very clearly stating that they don't recommend it in the soil report to the language being changed, kind of leaving open the door that this idea could be a good one to sink the house further down into the ground. It's been recommended to me both by Landmark, who's the soil engineer, and by my home builder that we not do that.
And that certainly changes things, and I think that's good information to know. But it also kind of, I think, reiterates the fact that we may have a house that isn't going to work if we can't.
So my question is, what house could be built here? If it's not this, what?
I'm not in a position to answer that without, again.
I think last month I recall a discussion that there are certain technologies that make it feasible to go below grade. some of the instances like
In
this.
certain
but
certain circumstances, I'm not
options
an
that-
engineer, so I'm not going there.
But-
You do it to,
options
I'm not an
that-
engineer, so I'm not going there.
But-
You
The
do it
ones
to,
that
They are still
landmark-
maybe not advisable from the point of the soil engineer.
Those are the ones that they clearly state that's not recommended.
Well, building a house where there's high groundwater is never great. So we've got the issue with the trees. I get it. The only way we're going to save more trees if you push it farther to the east, or there is a plan that shows the compliance with the setback. I assume it means the house is well within the ground. So that's not really even on the table. So I know last month we were talking about a 30-foot setback on the backside. That is going to result in a certain number of trees being removed. If we want more trees, it has to move farther to the east. There's almost no other workable option.
can I just, for point of clarification, with the 30-foot setback, there's technically only 2 specimen trees that are of caliber that are impacted.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. But I mean,
And that's why that's why
And at either setback, they would be
Every
removed.
case those go.
I think under any scenario, the 2 that actually fall under the code
Right.
remain the same. So I
And
think
it's-
that issue is really, no
Yeah.
matter what happens here,
right.
it's
the
important to
question's
note
the
that
same.
in the preservation policy, it is noted for groupings of trees of species,
Right.
appropriate species, that
Yep.
we can preserve
try
those as well.
I understand that.
And so given the fact that a third of the lot is probably going to be removed because of the ash, that's kind of why we're pushing the preservation of these trees.
so we have to go into the ground or we have to move the house farther to the east. In order to accomplish that, what do we want more, the wetland setback to the east or the trees to the west?
I mean, I think it's fair to note that, staff's recommendation all along was that the elevation was high. So if you push to the east, the reason for the drop in the elevation was to make it more feasible to get closer to that wetland in the front, which I get is counterintuitive, but it would preserve the trees and drop it down so that you could feasibly grade between that wetland and the front. So that's been staff's recommendation all along, and that's what we're kind of being ignored on. So.
It feels like we'll never get 100% of what we want. But yet
And I think the reality is I want to find a way to make it work for you. I really do. And that's why I almost want to take it off the shoulders of the commission and say, we have to follow staff's recommendations in this. And then if there's a redesign or if there's a change, if there's still concerns, come back, and if we have to approve 3 specimen tree removal or something like that. But again, this is not an easy issue, and we are really looking at if a decision we make tonight could say that this lot is not buildable. And I'm very uncomfortable doing that. That's why I want to keep deferring to staff's recommendations. I don't have the answer, guys. I don't. You asked the question, what kind of house could be built? I turn that to the builder.
No, we'd have to push the footings down to go 10 feet to that east wetland, yeah. I guess back to Commissioner Schaefer's statement that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Lowering the footings is really, that's the move that gets made if that home's going to slide to within 10 feet of the east wetlands. Because you're just not going to be able to slope the ground from that first floor elevation down to the east wetlands.
And what's the impact of doing that to the overall project?
Well, going against the engineer's recommendation of building the footings above the water table. I mean, again, to Commissioner Stoker's point, gravity's an awesome thing in that regard, and you're sort of fighting it, and you're using artificial technology to try to keep your lower level dry, and which yields angry phone calls to all kinds of people.
I'd also point out, have had a lot of discussions about water. Neighbor to the south is concerned about water. We're building between 2 wetlands. This isn't a normal piece of property where there isn't currently existing a lot of water. So the suggestion that we push the house deeper, maybe in another circumstance, might be reasonable.
Right.
But we're in between two wetlands.
Yes. And as a builder, I'm not telling you that's what I think we should do, but this may be a situation where you can't have a full basement with living space. You may need to be in a crawl space, or this might need to be slab on grade. I'm coming to, I guess, without just cut to the chase, you may be trying to design a house that will not work on this lot. And I think that's where we're at.
So I reached out to a realtor from Shore West to research homes built on slabs.
Yep.
In the last 10 years, there were 2 homes sold in Mequon on slabs. One was built in the 50s, one was built in the 70s. Neither of them are anywhere close to the type of home that we've designed here.
Right. So
building this home on a slab really presents all kinds of additional issues. So I'm kind of left with, I can't come up with something that the staff is okay with, that the commission's okay with, that the home builder and the engineer would advise, and I'm left with a piece of land that I own that I may have to sell to someone else who will be here in 6 to 12 months in front of all of you requesting the exact same thing that I am. Because what could they build that would be approvable by everyone here tonight?
I don't have any easy answers to that. Commissioner Barnes.
And I'm, again, not disagreeing with what's being brought up here. I'm just a fresh idea, and we don't have to get into the detail of it, but would there be a feasibility of a common driveway that would allow, call it a relocation of the house, proposed house framework and the driveway and its relative position to the wetlands with the gradient change? I just sent off, and
I'm not sure that the driveway is the particular concern.
We have approval from the DNR to cross the wetlands already with the driveway.
I understand, but in terms of placement, is really what I'm looking at. I think that the framework of the house.
It's pretty clear on the, trying to get the exact page here. It's pretty clear on page 119 of the packet. There's a certain setback from the front and rear wetlands and the grade that that's where you have to put the house, somewhere in that area, or very close thereabouts. The driveway is not really the issue. You just have to cross a wetland, which you can do with a culvert and still maintain the water flow.
But it wouldn't affect the position of the house in terms of an access coming from the south.
Not that many other places to go.
So
Yeah. Okay, enough said.
Yeah, can I just
Enough said.
one last thing? So we're basically to a point where we're saying we're willing to say that this land isn't buildable because of these 11 trees. These 11 trees that don't meet, because the 30-foot setback that we've proposed, that's the one where 31 trees would have to be removed. If we move it to within the setbacks to 10 feet off the east wetlands, that's saving 11 trees. But it would have to push the house down into the water table. So we're saying that based on those 11 trees, we're basically going to say that this this property isn't buildable.
And the home.
Because that's the decision.
And the overall home height.
We got to kind of take one issue at a time, just as the mayor proposed.
I don't think we can. I think it's a lot. I think that it's aggregate.
Right. I think it's everything as a whole for me. It's not, okay, let's talk about the trees and debate this. Let's talk about the home height. And, the trees are a consideration for me. The home height's a no-go for me. I think we've had some pretty hefty discussion. We've tried to legislate to our best ability on the fly as a commission here. I haven't heard one positive thing from the commissioners. I think you've heard the concern. I think Commissioner Stoker eloquently and pretty directly put it that maybe you can't build this house on there. You probably would have to look at some different basement configuration. You've got high groundwater on there. You're in between 2 wetlands. This lot has concerns. We're not saying it's unbuildable, but as the plan is before us today, I don't know that it's approvable. Based on that, I would like to make a motion to deny. I'm looking for a second and then to call the vote.
I would second that.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none. I have trouble with this. I'll just say this. I have trouble with this one because it's a challenging site. We're trying to protect the wetlands. I understand not wanting to put the basement well into the ground and the challenges that would present. And I understand the argument for the grove of trees, but tree preservation ordinance has standards for the species and caliper for clearly give us the right to approve or deny something. It's a little squishier when you get into trees that don't meet the size. I know the ordinance is a little squishy, but it's placing another undue challenge on this property. If we're going to keep this zoned R1B, we should be open to something being built there. Maybe this isn't exactly yet, but it's a challenging lot. It's been empty for a long time because it's a challenge. I understand everyone's reservations. I think we should find reasons to say yes where we can, and maybe this isn't the proposal. But just the trees on their own, it's more to me about the wetland setback. Last month we were okay with 30. We're just looking for the house to be a little lower. Apparently that the house is now growing, even though the basement shrunk a foot, the overall project grew a foot due to some technical miscalculation in the height. Maybe the commissioners are right. There's nothing, this isn't the right house configuration for the buildable area, but I think we got to be careful of making things too complicated for this site going forward. And maybe this isn't the project that makes it work, but we have a motion and a second, and I'll just leave with that statement. We'll see how the vote goes. Please call the roll.
Okay, the motion was to deny.
Correct.
Thank you. Commissioner Becky Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Stoker.
Nay.
Commissioner Lemke.
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Gentes.
No.
Commissioner Chorin.
Aye.
Alderman Strelchuk.
Aye.
Mayor Nurbin.
No.
The vote does pass 5-3.
Oh, we're past that item. Sorry. I think we should be open to something working here. This just wasn't quite it. Next item, Norway fence for Congregation Shabbat. Applicant is seeking a site plan amendment approval to allow for the fence along Mequon Road for the property located at 2233 West Mequon Road. You've got this one, Jack? Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, so this is a request from the Center for Jewish Life to put a fencing along the front of the property. This is the request is coming out of a security study that was done at the property. They're looking to put up a 6-foot metal fence along Mequon Road, approximately 300 feet in length. I have some pictures in this. There was a rendering that kind of was done. I will show you that to give you kind of a sense. Now, it's not 100% to scale. If you can see from the drawing here that the fence will not be that close to the road, and it will not be in front of our stop sign and our street sign, but they just wanted to put together a rendering just to kind of give you an idea what it was going to look like. Originally, this request was going to cover the entire frontage, including the road, but this road actually serves a number of residences in the back, so we told them we could not cut that off access to those properties. So instead, what they were suggesting and doing is building these columns and adding security cameras and lighting on these 2 columns. The fence would continue to the east. There was one section where they would have a gate. There's a little walking path that is used by the residences who walk to the site. So there's a gate they would put in this location here with a little bit of a code to get in there. Other than that, staff is supportive of the fence. There's a couple recommendations we made. One is that they add landscaping to the front. The fence will be about 7 feet off the property line, so there's a adequate space to put intermittent landscaping. Another one is, you can kind of see it, I'll zoom in a little bit for you. There's a, as you can see, there's a monument sign located right here, and the fence currently jogs around that. We're just asking that that fence is come straight this way, so there isn't that jog. I think that'll help with the vision corner, as well as keeping their sign unobstructed from people driving down Mequon Road. In addition, there's a couple of easements on the property. One is our utility easement, which Cole addressed in the report, and there's a We Energies easement as well that runs along the length of the property. That's for the electrical poles. So we just need to get some kind of clarification or approval from We Energies that they're allowed to put that fence within that easement area. And we are asking for the sewer easement to be modified to allow for that fence, and have a condition that if they ever need to get in there to work on the sewer, that they don't have to repair the fence. That'll be on the owner's dime. So with that, we do recommend approval of the fence according to the conditions in the report.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? I think it looks nice. So thank you. Commissioner Barnes?
Yeah, just a question is, the part of the fence, the proposed fence that's shown on what would be, I guess, the west side of the driveway, looks like.
This section, a small section here?
Correct. Would that be running from the, I guess, from the decorative entry monument out to the corner of the parcel?
It'll go to the corner of the property line and then kind of come back into the pillar, so it'll dead end into the property line.
Yeah.
Again.
So my only concern that I bring up is vision triangle, just like what you mentioned for in the other direction. It's really more crucial in that direction for seeing oncoming traffic, and it's not that you're going to block the entire view, but it's just constraining it a little bit. So I'm just wondering about the configuration on that side of the driveway.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. I mean, it is going to be 7 feet off, so the picture is a little bit misleading. So it is a little further back, and the fence is opaque. So it's got openings in it.
I was trying to look at that out of sight, just with respect to the stop bar and the sidewalk, etc. But it was just with what is a high volume street, and the use it's just a risk.
Yeah, when they submit for the actual building permit for the fence, we'll vet that out thoroughly at that point to make sure that there is no issues there.
That's a good comment, though, because it will be farther out than the fence on the east side with that one staff recommendation. But if that's going to be handled in the building permit process.
Yeah, we can handle that. I think the only thing we just want to watch on the other side is how much vegetation I don't know if you can see it here.
Yeah, there's a gully in there and what have you, so there's some challenge there to it.
Yeah, there's some grade issues. There's some. It's
sacrificing it to driver visibility of oncoming
traffic.
traffic.
So we're going to try to balance between the two. So I think we can handle it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Schaefer.
I have two things. The pictures, Jack, that are submitted, that's existing fence that is already on this site.
No.
What is this? Where is that?
The other picture? With
not the rendering, but the actual photos.
Oh, that's this one here?
Page 137? The one that has the man gate? Yeah, I think.
Oh, no, that's just a rendering.
This is a rendering?
Yeah, they put it just a kind of graphical rendering. It looks pretty realistic.
It's really good. It's really good art.
Thank you.
Well done. And then just a comment, like I'm sorry that you feel that you have to do this. I'm sorry for the reasons that you feel that you have to do this.
Commissioner Stoker.
I would just ask, does the applicant agree with the recommendations of staff? Well, seeing that, I would motion for approval per staff's recommendations.
Second.
Motion in multiple seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Looks good. Thank you. Next up, Parish Survey and Engineering LLC for Ozaki Country Club. The applicant is seeking a building plan and site plan amendment and specimen tree removal request approval to allow for a proposed 11,400 square foot building with parking lot, driveway, and rain garden for the property located at 10823 to 11185 North River Road. This you again, Jack?
No.
Lori's got this one?
Yes,
Lucky
thank you,
you.
Mayor. You may recall that when they were here last time, part of the approval was to make sure that no trees were going to be removed as part of the site plan. Unfortunately, that couldn't be achieved. So that's what brought us back here today.
No trees in the location of the northern end of the parking lot.
Yeah, between the parking lot and the River Road.
Correct. Okay.
Correct. So just kind of take this step by step here. So we ended up having to do a tree survey, the tree in which triggered then the tree specimen removal request that you're seeing. The Forestry Division recommends approval of the request to remove the 2 specimen trees noted in the report due to limited options for adjustment of the building without impacting additional trees. So that's pretty straightforward. The new proposal includes minor changes to the building. They're basically meeting the requests that we had last time, which is adding 2 windows onto the east elevation and also changing the roof color to match the other existing roofs on the property. Several changes were made to the site plan to reduce impacted trees on the property and the amount of grading required to accommodate the parking lot and structure. The location of the proposed building hasn't changed at all. The building does not comply with setback requirements from River Road, and that was an issue last time. There's a 50-foot ultimate right-of-way from River Road and a 60-foot setback from the ultimate right-of-way. The building is situated at 83 feet instead of the 110 feet that's required. Staff, however, supports this because the existing structures right now are much, much closer to the road. So this is still making it less non-conforming than before. Moving on to the parking lot. Mayor, do you have a question?
Nope. Get to
Sorry.
the parking lot. I think the
You
parking
looked like
lot
you
is
had
where we
something.
sort of left off last time.
Yeah. So the existing parking lot and drive aisle do not meet the IPS zoning district standards. The standard requires 20 feet off of the property line for the drive aisle and the parking lot. And on top of that, this parking lot not only goes to the property line, it goes into the ultimate right-of-way by 18 feet. The applicant is requesting conditional use grant waiver to forego that 20-foot setback and also a right-of-way waiver for the 18-foot encroachment into the ultimate right-of-way. So 2 things going on here. The applicant stated that they must place the parking in this location because the building will provide an adequate buffer between the cars and road balls shot off the nearby tee boxes located on the west side of the building. So you can kind of see that up on the screen there on the top portion. So the city has a 20-foot offset requirement for parking and drive aisles to provide room for landscaping and buffering between the buildings, roads, and adjacent properties. The 50-foot ultimate right-of-way was instituted to preserve space for future expansions of roadway and bike and pedestrian accommodations. While it's not anticipated that River Road would be widened to accommodate additional driving lanes, there is a potential that turning movements for the Mequon Road signalized intersection would require expansion in the future. In addition, there may be a future change in the city's philosophy on adding sidewalks or bike lanes on River Road. Essentially, if we remove this option, we're not getting it back. Staff recommends denial of the conditional use waiver and right-of-way waiver. Staff believes there's sufficient open space to construct a parking lot to the south of the proposed building, which could be protected by road golf balls with a combination of screening, landscaping, and fencing. Should commissioners approve the parking lot to exceed the 20-foot setback and encroachment into the ultimate right-of-way, staff recommends right-of-way waiver for the parking stalls location be executed and recorded with the following conditions listed in your staff report. This includes making sure that the property owner removes that portion of the parking lot and installs landscaping in accordance to the current code.
All right, thank you. So I think where we left off last time is there was a little disagreement over the number of exact number of parking stalls, and there was a desire to add more, assuming that more trees were not removed on the northern end. What does this plan reflect? I think it's 23 stalls, and how many?
So
there's some non-specimen trees that are likely to be impacted on the northern end.
Sure.
We have a number on that. So that was where we left off last time. We basically approved all of this, even with the setbacks for where the parking lot is now. And I'll disagree after walking the site. If we park cars to the south, they're not safe from golf balls, especially if I'm golfing. And they're also likely to be underwater, I think, some number of days during the year because everything drains down to the south, and it's very, very, very low and wet at certain times. So it's not a great spot for a parking lot. It, so I think we're left with the parking stalls and what's going on the north end, and we're basically back to where we were 2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that.
Jack, can you bring up the tree site plan?
We approved it, now it's different, so it came back.
So to kind of reference, in Mr. Mayor, what you're talking about, there's only 2 trees that are being proposed for removal on that north end, the far north end. Neither one of them is because of the parking concern. There's a small grouping of trees that's kind of being removed just to the north of, the arborvitae line that's kind of, you see the hash line at the bottom there. There was a few dead ash in there that actually we approved for removal. And then there was a downy hawthorn, but it was about 3/4 of the way dead. And so the 2 trees, the evergreens that are being removed, was one white spruce that was in real poor condition, and then actually there's 2 white spruce. So one was all but dead, and then the other one was it had Citus vera, so it's got a fungal disease that basically is killing it from the bottom up. And so those are the 2 that we approved for removal. Neither one of them is specimen. The 2 specimens are actually, if you look at the map behind you, actually they'll be west of the proposed building. They're circled in red on that sheet. Both of them are western red cedar. One of them 8-inch, one of them 13-inch. They're in good shape, but both of them have limbed up to a point that, standing by themselves, they're not in desirable shape, I guess. The other 3 that are on site, I think there's 5 of them total, are in such poor condition because they've been shaded out over the years that we wouldn't even consider them specimens, just because their condition rating is very poor.
Okay, so the parking lot crept a little farther to the north. There's a couple trees that are going to get taken out, but they were in bad shape or dead.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So basically, this just reflects the final version of what we thought we approved last month. We had some discussion about what was that actual number of parking stalls, and it sent it off in this direction. Now we've got a final determination. I think I've got all my questions answered. Are there any more questions from the commission? Commissioner Chorin.
So my understanding is that the way the parking is laid out now on the east side of the building was approved the last time?
We approved it. There was just a question over the total number, and there was disagreement on the final number. It wasn't even reflected properly in the plans due to a snafu on the other end. So there was some direction to approve it with whatever, I can't remember what number they wanted, if it was 24, 25. But we gave them guidance to not cut into the line of trees on that northeast side of the property. I guess this does cut into it a little bit, but it's going to remove 2 trees that are, one's dead and the other one's dying.
I think that was my recollection. I think I made the approval that we approved it if they didn't have to cut down any trees. I assume they're back because there's 2 trees, but finding out the condition they're in, I'm fine with that.
Is there a question or a comment, Commissioner Stoker? Or
nope.
Commissioner Lemke said everything you wanted to say. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Move approval with allowing the parking lot to be shown as presented in the packet, not necessarily with the staff recommendations and denial surrounding that.
Correct.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions?
Does the motion include the alternative planning commission conditions?
The alternative what?
The commission recommendations from staff. There was a couple with regard to the ultimate right of way. I just want to make sure if that's part of the approval over the ultimate right of way.
Jack, can you bring that up?
Yeah, let's bring it up and specifically which.
Let's vet that. Make sure that we got that buttoned down.
Yeah, we don't want it to come back for any reason. Hopefully. Is that item 4, the right-of-way waiver? Should planning commission choose to approve the building site and plan as proposed, requested waivers and the specimen tree removal, staff recommends the following. So there's the following 14 conditions. I think we're approving it with all those in play.
I just want to clarify that.
Correct. Is there any items in those 14 that the applicant takes issue with? I thought they were all common or reasonable. Some of them are required for the specimen tree removal.
We don't have a problem with them.
Does that include the connection to going with the connection to public water as well for the bathrooms in the building?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we're amenable to all those, we're recommending they be approved with staff's alternate set of recommendations, assuming we chose to ignore their prior set of recommendations. The 14 items on pages 144 and 145. Commissioner Schaefer.
For Alderman Strelchek, when you say move approval, does that mean that you're following staff's recommendation to deny the conditional use grant waiver and the right-of-way waiver? So there's 5, the way staff, it's 5 different items, and then for that last item, the tabling of the building and site plan, that's where the conditions come in. Did I read that correctly?
No, that's not what the motion encompasses. The motion embodies the paragraph that follows in the 14 conditions.
So we're just
Site plan as
the building
shown.
and site plan.
Site plan
amendment.
as shown.
Okay.
And I was out at the site, which is why I'm comfortable with it. I was out there and I looked at that, further south option for the parking lot. There was some discussion about moving the building west. And those are their tee boxes. I mean, literally it's like saying, oh, you want a parking lot, but ABC Manufacturing Company, we'd like to cut out 30 feet of your business building to do so. The country, from my opinion, the country club is in the landscape and the aesthetics of the property business. Golf is part of it, but the golf course over there has been pristine over the years. And if that golf course doesn't look pristine from that corner or any other vantage point for where people can see it, they're going to suffer on membership. And it's in their best interest to have this be as reasonable as possible. There's parking there currently. I don't see, based on the elevation of the road, adding a turn lane without having to build some kind of a retaining wall there anyway. I don't see Mequon Road expanding beyond what it is, to take out some of that screening, in that area. I mean, if it does, we'll have to deal with that in the future. But, my best hunch as somebody who's been on site and has made the motion is that this is definitely appropriate for where it's at. The other alternative for this building is a place that would be more intrusive on neighbors, where they also have a right to build this, and it might fit. One of the staff recommendations for the earlier approval was to build it further west over near the homes over there. I think that'd be more intrusive. This seems like a good fit where it's at, and the parking seems reasonable. I prefer people parked in place for the day as they're coming to do their work on the grounds. So, this was a good fit for me, and that's why I made the motion the way that I did. Just to give you some clarity, I saw you had some concern.
My concern actually was just about the phrasing. So because I was reading how staff recommendation addresses 5 different things, including the specimen trees, and you are specifically only making the motion about the building and site plan amendment. Is that accurate?
Approval of the building, the site plan, including
That one is-
parking, and then the specimen tree removal is appropriate with the 14 staff conditions. Should Planning Commission choose to approve building and site plan as proposed, requested waivers and specimen tree removal, staff recommends the following conditions for approval. That's on packet page 144.
Staff kindly gave us a choose your own adventure option here, since we basically did approve this last time. Along those same lines, just we hadn't reached total clarity on the number of parking stalls and exactly where they'd be. Now we're just closing the loop, so they're just reiterating their prior recommendations for denial that we didn't go with last time.
Got it.
There was a motion. I forget if there was a second.
There was a second.
There was a second. Any further comments or questions? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item's approved. Congratulations to Country Club. Next up, we have Newman Development Incorporated. Applicant is seeking a concept plan, preliminary plat, fill permit, and development agreement approval to allow for a 37-lot subdivision for the property located at 1310 West Highland Road, Highland Meadows. This is behind the Ascension Building. Jack, is this yours?
This is me.
Thank you.
So this is a request, as you said, for concept plan, preliminary plat, development agreement, and fill permit. This was in front of us in February of this year. The reason why the concept plan is back is because they changed the number of lots. If you recall, the last plan had 27 lots that was being presented, and that's because they were not sure and probably were not going to go with a sewer option. They worked it out with engineering, and this will be a sewer development, so they were allowed to increase the number of lots now to 37. So what I have in front of you is the updated concept plan. This is actually a little bit different than was in your packet because they did address some of the issues that I had in my report, and I'll kind of go through them. In terms of the plan, it complies with our new Uleo Creek Residential Cluster District. It requires to have at least 30% open space. This plan shows 34% open space roughly. They have to designate certain lots as side loading garages, which are color coded on your screen. Some of the things that we talk about in the report that we asked them to address is you can kind of see it in green. They're showing a dashed line here. This is a new addition from your plan. That's we were asking for a no-mow path to go around the entire perimeter. They added one here. It does say optional. We'd like to see that as required. And they also did add a tot lot. This location here, one of the things we required was an active play area per the code. So they did add that. We'll need to see a final plan for that as well. Just to give you some more insight into development, as you recall, with the Ascension Clinic on the corner, there's a path with lights. That path now will extend all the way to the end of development and actually have a little cross to cross the street in this location here, and it'll also continue up along Port Washington Road as well. I know there was something in your packet from former Mayor Abendroth about the lights. We did get a couple complaints, not too many, about the glare coming off those lights. We have been trying to work with the electrician who installed those and looking at, they have a house shield that may be installed on the lights to make that glare kind of go away a little bit. So we've been working with him on that. We haven't had a chance to get out there and actually see what we can do, but whatever we can resolve with that issue, we'll actually carry over to this as well. So we'll hopefully have that issue resolved. And by the time they get this installed, we should have a resolution to that one way or another. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. I do have my sketch that I drew after they submitted theirs. The one thing they don't do that we're looking for is to continue this no-mow path up this location where I drew the blue line that will continue all the way through the development. I think the concern there is some wetlands there, but this is a no-mow path, so the wetlands will actually just be in the wetland setback, which is fine. And they did ask for a wetland fill in this location here, which would allow us to cross through that way, and then this would terminate at the asphalt path in Port Washington Road. So that's really the only change that we're looking for from what they've submitted, and the fact that this is no longer optional but required in terms of that no-mow path. Other than that, with the development agreement that we have our template, they're allowed to build 3 houses as spec homes. This is not going to be a phased development. It's going to be all built at once. So they're allowed three spec homes to be built before final plat. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward. They, again, meet all the other requirements of the Uleo Creek District, and we're supportive of the development according to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bach.
Yeah, as I said last time, I think in February, I appreciate the detail and the thought that was put into this project. 3 years ago, I live in that neighborhood, and I was getting hit pretty hard with the original proposed development. And, previous Mayor Worth was told that there will never be residential development on this tricky corner. And to see this, I'm really appreciative of the work that you put in, and I'm supportive of all the with staff recommendations this project. One thing I would keep in mind as you go forward on this in that area, and Commissioner Becky Schaefer will probably agree, but that it's tricky traffic now between the river on Highland and that new on and off ramp. So there's a new traffic pattern over there. As you know, people are getting used to that traffic pattern. There's a lot of cyclists there in the summer, that use that route. The speed between the river and Port Washington Road, people are moving pretty quickly. I've seen the police over there, coupled with the fact that you've got dismissal and pickup for Oriole Lane, and they're queuing up on Highland Road. And there's probably a couple near misses I hear when I'm walking my dog. So it's going to be a little bit tricky, I think, on the entrance on Port Road and the exits on Highland Road, and how that all will work with the engineering on the traffic is something that I would just keep in mind. I'm sure there's been some thought put into it, but it's getting to be kind of a busy area. Those are my comments, but thank you.
Commissioner Chorin.
I also live very close by and reiterate everything Mr. Bach said. But to the point, that Dan Amendroth had made, those light fixtures, they've got to be fixed. It looks like searchlights that are up and around Ascension. They're pretty bad. So
I would like to talk about this more too, because I drove past there. I don't drive by there much at night, but I drove by approximately 2 weeks ago, and it's a bit visually alarming. It's not just the shading. I think it's the color temperature as well.
Yeah,
I don't know what Kelvin those
should be that should be a 3000 K light, so it shouldn't be overly white. And so I don't know. We can verify they install the right luminaire as part of this process, but those should be actually relatively a calm color. It shouldn't be very
3K would be nice, but visually it looks more like 5 or 6.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. So that we can verify to make sure that, because sometimes they put in the wrong to get to whatever from the supply house. They put whatever they get in there, but we can verify that they did put the right one in.
I think we should, and then continue that around. But something's off there.
But I think they've done a good job. This plan doesn't illustrate. We're going to see a grading plan at some point, won't we? It's not in the packet, is it?
I can ask that. That's a good question. Yeah, Cole would be able to answer that question. I'm not sure where we're at with that.
And I think they submitted a preliminary grading plan at least with it. It's just not in the packet.
Okay, yeah, because
and utilities.
It'd be interesting to see what kind of grading is proposed around on the west property line to protect that individual that has that very large farm area there. I think in the past she's expressed some concern about trees over there. But we made a point when we approved the Ascension that it was bermed around the perimeter of that to avoid any headlights, into the residence. And how that works.
That's a good point. Have you talked with her, that neighbor Marilyn Weinberg over there in the farmhouse? That's, I think, who you're talking about.
Yes, I assume that's who you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have not, but I can see there was a preliminary grading plan put in there that hasn't been fully reviewed by engineering. That we've got some biofiltration and dry pond just to catch any swale water that's along Highland Road from flowing onto her property, redirecting it where it inevitably goes to the north.
I'd strongly suggest you talk with her, with that neighbor, the Weinbergs, the one with the farm.
And what would be the?
Well, I mean, she had been pretty vocal in the past.
She's very supportive of it, and I'm happy to sit down with you too if you wanted to do that together. I mean, I know her and have been over there, but she's supportive of the project, so it'd just be good to, kind of a neighborly gesture to show interest. Very nice lady, but I think might get some points with that.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the neighbor, the connection to Oriole Lane. Where is that going to be?
they show, that you can see a little path connection there. Now, of course, right now it doesn't really go anywhere, but if, there's residents that live here that attend the school, or, grandparents or something, that they could always walk up here, and then it would be up to Oriole Lane at that point to accommodate any kind of connection to the school. But we thought, have them put it in now, and then, if it's necessary, the school can look at further. It doesn't have to be asphalt either. They could just have a nice mowed area that they can walk through there. So
But that's not Weinberg property. That's MTSD property.
that's a school property. Weinberg property ends probably around here somewhere in this location.
And then the lights. I think we've talked about them enough. But is there even so two separate issues? What is existing at Ascension, I do think is a concern. But what is going to be done with this? Is there any way to make it? I feel like it needs to be more. Yes, you need them for safety and for visibility, and also it's a neighborhood. So anything that's going to be like blue is going to be exceptionally jarring, even more so than it is on that corner. Can it be a different shade in the subdivision than it is?
We're a long way from lighting. We hope that.
Okay, maybe just something to take note of.
And
Well,
we're
we wanna-
rent takers, so as long as you tell us what's back,
Yeah.
We want to make sure it's consistent throughout the whole court, because these lights would actually eventually could extend all the way up to Pioneer Road. So we want to make sure that we have consistency throughout. So we want to fix this issue now before it gets further carried away. But again, those should be,
Maybe it's an odd manufacturer.
well, one of the reasons why I think it's so evident is because we went with a more traditional fixture, which is not a full cutoff fixture, so the lights, you can see the source, and we thought the lens would help with that, and with the color temperature being as low as it was, I guess. And we worked with a lighting designer to help us with this, so we thought we were comfortable. But then we did get we didn't get a ton, but we got some complaints on it. So we just had trouble tracking down the electrician that put them in to work with them now, because Ascension's kind of out of it at this point. So I did get a hold of him. I had a conversation with him last week. He's willing to work with us. We're going to do like a sample, one of the lights, is try to see what we can change there to make it look better. And then if we get to a point where we can't redress it, then we'll come back with Plan B at that point. But we're trying to. We're confident we can fix it somehow, either maybe with a thicker lens on there, or just like I said, they have a house shield that you can put around it that basically will block the side light, so it'll shine straight down, almost like what a full cutoff fixture does. So I think we can get there. We're not there yet, but we can get there, I think, before they get to a point where they're ready to install.
And we would only see this again for final plat.
Yes.
Commissioner Strelchek.
So, continuing on the lighting, I'm looking to have a condition with a motion here that either, if somebody else makes a motion, I'd add as a friendly amendment. So how do we want to articulate that? Because
I would
what there
say
currently isn't working. I don't want to see it repeated here. I don't think anybody else.
I would say change condition 1 to add something to the effect that with modifications that reduce the color, temperature, and glare of those the current fixtures on Ascension, something of that nature. Because basically, condition 1 says it shall include the approved light fixture. So once we make changes to that approved light fixture, that would carry on over to this.
Okay, so
We don't know exactly what we want now because we need to fix whatever we
Yes, correct.
got.
But we're all
That shouldn't be controversial.
no, we're all. I think
Sounds easy.
everybody's on the same page. I'm sure they're willing to.
Whatever we tell him to do, he'll do, and
It's like
it's up to us to get it right.
we'll have to bring a landscape plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only other thing that'll come back. Street trees and landscaping will have to come back as well.
I just wanted to make a comment. I'm really pleased to see single family residential where I don't live there. I grew up there. I was across the street from Commissioner Chorin as a kid, so he knows that I hot dog through the neighborhood on my bicycle and a bunch of other things. But I grew up in that neighborhood. It's a safe and it's a good neighborhood, and to have more residential just north of there, that's as a kid, that's what a lot of the old neighbors had wished for, and I'm really, really pleased to see that that's back in the area again. So thank you. Great plan. I'm glad you're hooking up with sewer and water, and I'm in support of this with the lighting adjustment. I'll make a motion.
Sure, let's get to Commissioner Barnes real quick.
One minor question, or maybe a little premature of where you're going, but I see, you've got a condition here for connection with Highland Road requiring acceleration, deceleration lane, and all fine and good. I guess I'm just wondering softly about the need for a bypass lane at this particular location. And I guess only from the standpoint of the right-of-way, realigning lanes at the approach to Port Road and so forth. And again, without having studied at depth what you got here, I would suspect that predominant traffic at that intersection will be to and from Port Road. A lot of it, not all of it, certainly over the Sewell. So I guess I'm simply wondering about the need for a left turn lane is what I'm presuming is what's stated by condition number 12.
There's a bypass proposed on the south side.
Yeah, the bypass to the south side. It's nice to have, but from my traffic, is it something that's necessary that people are going to cheat on and create another problem with the downstream intersection? It's a minor point, so I'd approve it if we were putting a bypass on it. But just kind of question its necessity.
Well, we had numerous discussions on the request for waivers to the bypass lane in the past. I think we built something into our land development specs that dictates when it's appropriate.
Right. I think just for context, and this is from memory, so don't quote me, but I think if it's based on the traffic count of Highland at this point. So I think if it's over 1,500 ADT, then it needs a bypass, and I think it's at like 3,000, 4,000, something like that. So.
And I understand and respect that very, very much so. I guess what I often observe is people violating. People just drive right through there. Example is Tosa Road. Immediately north of Mequon Road is a good example of that, where bypass lanes were introduced and they create another condition. And I guess I'm questioning how important it will be to have a left turn lane bypass. Very minor point.
Just so I understand, were you saying that the traffic count warrants it or it does not warrant it?
Sorry, it does warrant it, yeah, by a pretty substantial margin.
But it's not in the plan.
It's not. It's in the preliminary plans that were submitted. Okay. It's probably just not shown on this.
It's not shown on the.
I think part of it introduced my confusion.
Sure.
I'm not seeing anything because I know there's a variety of different ways you can align those.
Right.
And make it work. And as I recall, there's nothing on the south side of the
it's not,
property.
So these plans are just site centric, and they don't get into the ancillary.
Yeah, you can kind of see it on the across from the access there. It's just a very faint line, but it is there.
Yeah, we just had the concept plan up before.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I'm just bringing up is it crucial to have at this particular site for this use because of the proximity to Port Road and its left turn lane as well. But I would.
It's sounding like it is.
Yep. Sounding like it is.
Yeah, I would say yes. Yep.
It'll bump down the south side of Highland Road, and on the eastbound traffic, there will be a left turn into the neighborhood. That's typical of a bypass design.
Yes.
The detail may not be included in the plans, but the final review said it will. And then on the north side, as is already mentioned, the XL decel lanes are there.
Right.
So it sounds like we're generally all in alignment with some of the recommendations staff had that weren't in the report, except for maybe the path on the northern side.
Yeah, I guess that's the question. If you make a motion, are you willing to include the continuation of the normal path on the north side, and then just the reiteration that we need to get a final plan for the pocket park if you want to make that as part of your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion with that. And condition 1 on the lighting that we're going to work on a greater cutoff and address that color temperature per staff final review and approval.
Okay.
The goal is to create something that we can have consistent throughout, right? So moving approval based on those conditions.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is the intent of that adequately captured?
Yep.
Okay. Any other further comments, questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item's approved. Looking forward to the development. It's gonna really make that part of town look nice. A long time coming. And the neighbors love it already. You got two here. Next up, we have St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church. The applicant is seeking a certified survey map approval to allow for a modified property lines and rezoning recommendation approval from R4 zoning to B1 and IPS for the property located at 1600 to 1717. There's too many digits in that address. West Mequon Road.
Yeah, that works.
Quick staff
Thank you.
overview. Lori, you got this one?
I've got this one,
All
sir.
right.
Thank you. Right now, we're proposing to go and split off the St. John's Church property up so that it's one lot, which is 1.55 acres. The intent is to rezone this as B1 to be used for a insurance company. They'd like to go and retrofit the existing barn and house for that use. And then we're going to leave the other 4.36 acres with a child care center, which is already on the lot, the church, and then there's a home. The child care center is currently zoned R4, so we're requesting that that be rezoned IPS to match the rest of the lot and get rid of that split zoning. The proposed zoning changes are not completely consistent with the land use plan map designation, which designates adjacent properties as residential and institutional. However, Children's Hospital is right across the street, and we've just historically used that as the transition mark between our commercial district into our residential district, so it's really not that far fetched to change that across the street into B1. Both lots meet their proposed zoning district bulk dimensions and permitted use standards. However, staff has some concerns about the future buyer's proposal to retrofit the house and the barn for commercial use and its ability for its building plans to meet state code standards. Staff recommends that the B1 zoning change would not take effect until the CSM is recorded. Building and site plans have been approved by Planning Commission, and the future buyer, Joe Wolfel's State Farm Insurance, building plans have been approved for commercial use by the state.
Okay, any further comments from the commission? I think the rezoning of the IPS is a total no-brainer. It's just, it's a bit of a mess to have the split zoning on that parcel. I'm curious on people's opinions on the B1 use for the residential, well, now residential property. It is true that Children's is right across the street. That was maybe laid out in such a manner that the stormwater pond was served a nice buffer from the residential that was to the west. There's maybe a little more limited space to work with that here. It's the insurance office isn't a concern. I think if we're going to rezone it, we have to think about what might be there in the B1 district someday. So I don't know if people have thoughts they prepared on that. I could see this particular use working. Maybe let's bring up the B1 definition from the code and just make sure everyone understands it completely.
Well, B1, the definition of the code is actually a neighborhood commercial zoning district, so it's for uses that you would typically find in a neighborhood. Now, we use it a lot of times in cases like this where there's a buffer between residential and commercial, even though this is on our main commercial corridor. We would never want to see a B2 here, because then you have the allowance for fast food and other type of high intensity uses. So the B1 has more restrictive uses, but I anticipate this will be a concern at council a little bit with the creep going west along Mequon Road, and where do we stop? This is kind of the same situation we had a number of years ago with the Richmond Investments off of Mequon Road and 76th Street, where that's the last one again, and it was a residentially zoned lot, and they went in. It turned out really nice, but there was concerns from the neighbors as well as what's going to happen in long terms for the rest of these properties as we go further. I think this one makes a little bit more sense in the sense, or same amount of sense I think as Richmond does, because this one kind of lines up, like you said. I have the zoning map up on the screen. It does line up pretty close with the end of the children's B3 zoning on the other side. Now, the only concern you'd have, and I'm not sure there's not much you could do about it, is if it does get rezoned B1, you're getting, like you said, future use 5-10 years from now, and somebody else wants to go in there and convert that from an insurance agency to something else, you could end up with a little bit more intense use there. So that would be the only concern, and there's not much really we could do about it once we rezone it to the our B1 zoning district. Keeping it R4, it has marginal use as a single family home in that location. So I think it should be changed to something. Originally, I don't know if you recall, when we did a lot of the changes to the other churches and other public service institutions, I asked them if they wanted to rezone at the time to complete IPS, and they said no, they wanted to wait because they were going to sell that piece, and that's why we left it split zone at the time.
Remind me, what are the examples of B1? That we'd have to be in the future. What are some of those?
Well, even across the street, if you look right here on Market Street, that's B1, where as our ladies are. It doesn't allow for fast food, but it does allow for a sit-down restaurant.
Yeah.
So you could end up with something like that there in long term, and that's why we're trying to protect it as best we can by not allowing the zoning to go into effect until their plans get approved. So if they don't get approved for this, I mean, again, 10 years if they sell and somebody wants to tear it down, that you can only protect it so long. So.
Jack, my goal is to find a way to have the current use be approved, but mitigate future use. I don't think that site's appropriate for a restaurant. I think if the church would come forward and ask to have it be zoned institutional, that they could put an increased size daycare, which would have in and out traffic, which would be greater than what the insurance company would. What I'm looking at is 20, 30 years down the road, if Mr. Wolfel decides that he wants to eventually retire or something else, or pass that on and sell that property, what are we legislating for here today as far as the use of the land? I think what's being asked for here is accurate. My family used to own 1516, which is 2 doors down. I used to exit at that exit right by the church because I had my office on Port Road, but I'd come out the back and go back out to go home that way through Thiensville. The intersection is, it's a little tricky during rush hour to get out just from, Market Street back there and things like that. But, my goal is to have something like soft office. So is that the accurate zoning? Like, obviously, clearly, we don't want to see fast food there. That's not an appropriate site for that. I think the restaurant in and out is going to, that's going to be a disaster. If anything,
The only thing
people have a right to build that based on the zoning we go forward with today.
The only thing you could do, and you can't do it just for the B1 site because it's not large enough on its own, but you could do it, and they'd have to agree to it. You'd have to do IPS with a B1 with a PUD overlay over the entire site, which restricts the B1 use to office. That you could do.
Is that weird? What's the catch?
Well, they have to agree to it because they're limiting their rights. I mean, we have these. In fact, we have a similar circumstance right now with the old Bruce City Barbecue that has a PUD that dictates that can only be a restaurant. So it's B2, and all the people are coming in and say, "Oh, I'd like to do this," and nope, you can't do that without a rezoning change. So it does restrict the use of the site, but if both parties are willing to accept that, then that's a compromise that works.
So I think so everyone can understand, I brought up the B1 district, and under permitted uses, I think it's the part in parentheses 1 that are maybe at most issues. So under Prin 1, it's retail trade establishment which supply convenience and specialty goods and services, including but not limited to groceries, meats, dairy products, baked goods or other convenience goods, drugs, dry goods, and notions. And then 2, 3, and 4, I think, are maybe much less of an issue, perhaps. Personal and professional establishments which perform services on premises, including but not limited to repair shops, watches, radio, television, etc. Tailor shops, beauty parlors, barber shops, photographic studios, dry cleaners, laundries. 3 is general offices, and 4 is finance, insurance, and real estate services, but not limited to banks, insurance offices, savings and loan and associations, and security brokers. So So those are the permitted uses in the district. So if we're rezoning it to that with no conditions, you're likely to have, someday you're probably likely to have something in 1 or 4. The other ones are maybe a little less likely, but
So B3 is what Mickelson wanted.
well, B3 is just general office.
Yeah, B3 is general office. It really this wouldn't, you know, I guess you could go down that path as well, but I have to check one thing on that.
I don't think the acreage is correct.
Yeah, the acreage might not be enough.
So that zoning district with a variance.
Yeah, that's well, then we can't approve the CSM if you don't meet then you're approving basically a non-conforming land division. So that's why they had to meet the B1 acreage. So I guess that's the only thing I can think of as an option if you're really protecting the future uses would be IPS with B1 with PUD overlay that would limit it to general office or finance, insurance, or real estate offices. That way, in the future, if somebody else wanted to go there, they would have to come back and amend the PUD before they would be allowed to put in a sit-down restaurant. Now, that's, again, the applicant, it's a PUD, so that has to be agreed on by the owners of the property. But if you're going to tell them that we're not going to approve it without that condition, my guess is they're going to be okay with it.
Commissioner Barnes.
Yeah, just further on the reference to the B1, could you clarify for me the statement in the background? You say the future property owner intends to retrofit the home for office use, okay, in the barn for storage of business-related items. What do we mean there? And I'm just in terms of long-term,
Joe, would you like to explain?
Interim type of.
Yeah, so the barn I don't really plan on doing much with because I don't. But I have a 1989 fire truck that I use for events and goes into the family fun before the 4th parade and that kind of stuff that will fit in that. But once it's in there, that's the only thing that's gonna fit in there. So, so as far as concern, it's not a concern that I can't put, or I couldn't, and I don't intend to put, start renting out storage stalls or anything.
Because it refers to business-related items.
Oh yeah, it's branded. It's got State Farm all over it. I mean, it's
okay.
So, like I said, I use it like birthday parties and neighborhood events and parades and that kind of stuff. And so that would be the parking spot for a vintage fire truck. I guess on the other note, as far as the, I understand the concern to protect the future planning of this space. I'm 41. I plan on retiring out of State Farm, and maybe by retiring, it might be retiring horizontally, right? I don't really plan on ending that job anytime soon. You're talking 30 plus years before I'm leaving that position at least. And so I guess as far as a potential concern to ease that, I've been looking and trying to buy buildings or buy a site within Mequon, one that I can afford and one that makes sense as a small business owner as an investment. And that's what I looked at this is. This is not a property I plan on flipping. This is not a property I plan on leaving. I've got 3 kids that are sitting out there because their mom's a nurse and I had to pick them up from school. So far, none of them have intended to, at oldest being 10, say that they're going to be a State Farm agent, but there is history of that running in the family. And, I'm looking to establish a home for my business long term. This is one of the few places that I've been able to identify that I can afford, that I can still retrofit to make work for my uses. I've got a little bit of concern if we put something on it that 35 years from now potentially restricts on how I can sell it. But again, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon if I can own a property in Mequon. And that's unfortunately becoming a concern.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for your children for making them sit through 2 hours of this meeting.
So
If I had known they were waiting, I would have asked for a
We would've
motion to
suspended
suspend the rules and taken you up first. But
They've been through this before. I sit on the town and Delafield board, so they've been through this before a time or two. But yeah, so.
And I did look up the
and I certainly
B3.
appreciate the perspective on where you're coming from, but we're making a decision with rezoning that will
Sure.
Yeah.
will be here when we're all horizontal.
Right.
So I hope we can respect that as well.
I'm gonna live forever.
Good luck with that.
I did look up the B3. It does have the same lot size requirement of 1.5, but it does still also allow sit-down restaurants as well. So the difference between the two basically is the retail portion. The B3 does not allow retail component. It has all the other uses, but it also has the sit-down restaurant issue. So
I didn't see a restaurant in B1.
what's that?
Is there a restaurant in B1?
I believe there is, yes.
Not drive-through.
Not without a drive-through, yes. I think it's conditional.
Just read the totality of it. Maybe just the overview. Regardless. Any other comments from the commission, or is there a motion? I like the particular use we're going for here, but I just want to make sure we don't have concern about what else could be built, 20, 30, 40 years from now. I just don't want to leave a mess for another council or planning commission to clean up.
Sure.
I'm not saying it would be a
understand.
mess.
I mean, I fully understand that. I guess it's also.
Yeah, restaurants are conditional in the B1, but they
conditional.
can't be, it's not a fast food. It can't be fast food.
Okay, but it's conditional, which gives us the ability to control it.
To some degree, yes.
That's what I was going to say. Can't you make this just conditional so it's
That's what he's
protected
saying.
for?
That's what the PUD would be.
Yeah, PUD. And just,
Well, the PUD would restrict, if you're going to go a PUD route, you would restrict the uses there totally.
yeah.
So they wouldn't have the ability to seek anything other than whatever uses you want to see there.
Right.
If you just go B1, you do have the ability to regulate conditional uses in there. But again, it's not like it used to be where the state laws changed over the years. You can't just say no to a restaurant because two neighbors don't want it. You can put conditions on it, but you just can't say no. So it depends how concerned you are over the long-term use of that site and how do you want to go about it.
Can we do the PUD with B1 and just have a condition where there would be no allowance for restaurant?
Sure. You can with the PUD you can stipulate, it's an agreement between parties. So you can, as long as they agree to it, you can stipulate uses with regard to what you're going to allow or not allow there. So I would, depending on what you're looking for, you could either say it has to be office of some sort, or if you're okay with a retail component, you could say office and retail, or if you're don't want either one, you could just say general office only or financial insurance and real estate.
I don't want to limit it to financial, insurance, and real estate.
And then,
I
or
wanna
you could
allow
add,
for some flexibility, but I don't want to see it. Like my goal is to not see the rest. It's right next to residential.
right.
It's that buffer property. If we would approve Richmond's for a restaurant, I don't know that the neighbors would be as pleased as they would be with the Richmond property as it sits right now. And I want to allow for the flexibility on the property because of its proximity to the other business, but limit I don't think it's an appropriate site for a restaurant due to the fact that it's right next to residential and also the egress, the in and out on Mequon Road. I think it would be a challenging site.
Yeah, then if you're not as concerned with the retail component, then I would do the IPS with the B1 PUD overlay that basically prohibits any restaurant on the premises.
Would you be comfortable with that, Mr. Wolfel?
Potentially. Is you said an agreement between parties, like I mean that's.
Well,
Is there still a clear severance between, obviously.
Well,
would like to.
The institutional use will be part of the PUD only because of the acreage necessary, but their use itself would not be regulated anything other than the IPS zoning district. But we have to include them.
I guess what I mean is there a continued tie to like the entity of the church?
The only
owning the
tie is this PUD overlay. It's no different again what we did with the Landmark Credit Union and the RBs, those are all part of a PUD, but they're all separate and distinct entities.
Fast forward.
I'm
50
still
years.
confused on the IPS. Why is there need to be any IPS on this?
Because
site?
you can't do a PUD just for the one site because it's not large enough. Our code requires at least a 2-acre minimum for a PUD. So that's why you have to include the IPS as part of the zoning, but you don't regulate the IPS other than what's allowed per the code. And this is kind of what we did a little bit with, it's a little different, but similar to the ICAP property. The ICAP property, we did a PUD over it because we did not want to see retail in that back portion. So all the front properties were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do on Port Road as long as they complied with the B2. But the property in the back was B2, but they could not do retail back there or restaurants, I believe. It had to be something else. So the only connection between the two is you're sharing a PUD boundary line, but that's really about it.
And would he have flexibility to be IPS if he ever did sell it and that could just fold into the IPS?
If you wanted to go IPS, you'd have to ask, you'd still have to have the rezoning at that point. You can't, you'd have to pick one or the other, but.
But assuming there was a sale at whatever future point, right? There's not an agreement or just like now we're fast forwarding to a new group.
Yeah, you don't need approval from them. It
Right,
just limits
okay.
what can happen on the
As
site
far
that
as
you own.
splitting the
Yeah.
church and okay, I mean, just to make sure. So, yeah, I mean, theoretically, I guess I'd want to get a little bit more information before I.
So we could approve it along those lines, and if you don't like it, you don't have to do it, and you can.
Right.
Well, it's also gonna go to this is a recommendation to council, so the
Correct.
council may not recommend
Nothing
it
will
or they
be
may not.
official for at least 2 more months because we have to go for a
First reading
and,
next month and following, yes.
So there'd be plenty of time to review it by then.
Yeah, okay. Well, and if that's the case, I guess once more for clarity, the only thing that's being restricted is preventing a restaurant. However, anything else that would fall into the B1 use or conditional use, subject to approval at that time, would still be.
I think that's the motion
Doable.
Commissioner Strelchek made.
Yeah.
Maybe it was seconded. I've lost track by now.
Well, that's the official motion that I'll make, is that I move for approval with the IPS, the PUD, how do I phrase that?
IPS and B1 with the PUD overlay.
IPS and a B1 with a PUD overlay excluding the use of restaurants.
Yes, and the zoning ordinance that'll go to council will have that laid out in the ordinance.
I think it'll be more palatable for council as well. I think as it stood, I know a couple council members that would potentially push back on it. So I think this is a good option for approval both here and then possibly there.
I mean, even again, if or whenever it's sold, I wouldn't. That's not an ideal restaurant site, so I'm not really.
Right.
My concern isn't that piece is there. I just want to make sure that nothing else is off the table.
So you have a motion.
We have a motion,
Motion,
and a second.
In a second, no.
Any further comments or questions regarding that motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes, and you can take some time to digest it, and there's plenty of time to catch up with it because of the glacial pace government moves at.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have announcements. Our next meeting is next month, Monday, February 28th at 6 p.m. And beyond that, we just need one more motion.
So move to that motion you're about to make.
The motion to adjourn.